Welcome back, everybody. Goreflow here, and it's Wednesday. You know what that means. It's another episode of Workshop Wednesday. Today, I have something very special for you guys. We've got Shupe Scoia'tael, and this is one of the most, if not the most, powerful decks on the ladder right now. Shupe Scoia'tael has been used by many players to achieve a very high ranking. I myself managed to hit global rank 1 last week with it. And I'd just like to take the time today to kind of explain a few things about this deck, what makes it strong, what makes it weak, ways to counter it, different matchups, just a few general tips and tricks. You should find this helpful if you are playing the deck. You should find this helpful if you are playing against the deck. So really, everyone should find this helpful.
A new follower has flowed into the flow zone.
Thank you for the follow. Let's move on to the next slide here. So we're going to start off here talking about the strengths and weaknesses of Shupe. Obviously, I'm sure you've heard, the strongest thing that Shupe has is its +1 card draw. It is the only deck which is able to achieve card advantage in this way. So not only are you going to have your Silver Spy guaranteed with Brewer, but you're going to be able to use Shupe draw 60% of the time to gain an additional card advantage on your opponent. This gives Shupe Scoia'tael unmatched bleeding potential in round 2. So if you're playing a weather deck or you're playing great swords, watch out. They might get the card draw. It has a very strong, uh, versatile bronze package. Since it's a Shupe deck, if you're a little bit less familiar with the game, maybe you haven't played Shupe before, you're not super sure. It means you can't have any duplicates in your deck. So that's supposed to weaken the deck. Right now, Scoia'tael is one of the strongest factions, so even though you have to have different bronze cards, you're still going to have a stronger bronze package than most decks, just because of the inherent strength of the faction which plays it. It has some of the strongest finishers in the game. Shupe himself is an excellent finisher, averaging around 20 to 25 points. You can usually pull even more if you get things set up the right way. We've got Isengrim to tutor a silver or bronze ambush unit. That's at least an 18-point play usually. Hattori, don't even get me started on Hattori. You can resurrect Barclay. This is something that's going back a few metas now. Um, Shiru for tall units. And we've also got a Glace. I actually like to run Igdi in my list, but sometimes people run a Glace. In fact, most of the time they run a Glace. So you can go ahead and steal a spell out of your opponent's graveyard. That's an 8-point body on top of what's most likely a silver spell. So very strong as a finisher. And despite what people may say about the RNG chance of Shupe, you're going to have a high level of consistency in this deck because you are guaranteed 100% to pull Yavin with Brewer. That is kind of what makes this deck a problem in a lot of people's eyes. You're going to get Yavin every time, so you're going to be able to play your Silver Spy and gain card advantage, whereas other decks need to get lucky and just hope that they draw into it. And then since you set up the deck to only have one spell, Shupe himself, and Yavin tutors a spell or a unit, you always get access to Shupe. So the chain goes Brewer, Yavin, Shupe. Let's get on to the weaknesses. Now, you don't hear a lot about these because everyone likes to hate on Shupe, but we do have some weaknesses as Shupe players. The deck is linear, not exponential. It's not a deck like Weather Monsters, Great Swords, Consume, where you've got some sort of engine ticking over a long round, snowballing, gaining more and more value. It has a flat rate of value. Maybe you get one row of weather ticking or something like that, but you're not going to beat these decks in long rounds. You need to play around that as a Shupe player, and the other person needs to use that to their advantage. The finishers are equal or lesser than alchemy decks. So you can't use your normal strategy of bleeding the alchemy player to a short round, because even though you may have Shupe in your hand, they still have cards which get equal or even greater value. I'm talking about Triss Telekinesis. I'm talking about grabbing a Recon to bring out a Viper Witcher or an Ointment to bring back a Viper Witcher. and just put down a ton of damage. Um, and of course, they also have other very strong options with Rainfarn into Joachim, into maybe another Viper Witcher, or an Alchemy chain. I'm sure we've all been in that position where the Alchemy player plays about 6 or 7 cards in one turn. Um, Moving on to the next point, Shupe is weak against uh, exponential decks. Like I said, it's linear. It's not going to do well against things like Axeman, Great Swords, Consume, and it does have a level of inconsistency. So where it's consistent with things like Yavin and Shupe, arguably very important cards, it's not consistent when it comes to deck thinning. Shupe does not deck thin hardly at all. It mostly just plays one card at a time. Maybe you'll thin 2 or 3 cards out of your hand in the game, but by the end, still going to have 10 cards in your deck. So it does have a few weaknesses. You might be able to turn these to your advantage if you're playing against it and you understand how it works. Uh, so how to play Shupe? Um, Linear matchups such as alchemy, hand buff, or the mirror. Now, this is just a general guide. I'm not going to get into the details and specifics. If you want to see exactly how it's played, you can come down here to Twitch TV /Goreflow and watch me play it or play it yourself. But this is just kind of a general idea of how to play the deck in certain matchups. So in linear matchups like alchemy, hand buff, the mirror, veterans, you want to pass early if you can secure card advantage. It's not a problem to pass early. You don't have to worry about getting stuck in a long round with your opponent. In exponential matchups, such as Axeman, Greatswords, Consume, Elf Swarm, Weather Monsters, we've gone over this list a few times now. Passing early is not an option. You need to play for a short round 3. Don't pass early to get card advantage. You're going to have a bad time. They're going to maybe even 2-round you. How to beat Shupe. So you need to play around Shiru. This is really important. I see a lot of players not playing around Shiru, especially at the high ranks. Of course, we see ridiculous things at the high ranks, like opponents scorching themselves and such, but it's very important to play around Shiru, not line up your tall units. Try not to have the highest unit on the board. Shupe doesn't normally play tall units, so this might be difficult. Just try not to stack them at the same strength. You need to play around Shupe Charm. I'm talking to you, Sabbath decks. I'm talking to you, Great Swords. I'm talking to you, hand buff decks. If you've got a single tall unit on the board in round 3, you're going to get charmed. Don't put resiliency on your Imlerith Sabbath and expect him to not get charmed the next round. You need to put a bunch, at least a few little units on the board before you start putting the tall units, because one tall unit is a 100% chance to get charmed if you actually get the ability in your lineup, and that's a 60% chance. So definitely worth playing around. You want to play on 2 rows only. A lot of Shupe players use the Shupe Weather as their backup option if they miss Shupe Draw or Shupe Charm. So if you've got units on all 3 rows, you're going to get the full brunt of this effect and get completely obliterated. This is something I don't see enough players doing, and I think that just if you were to ignore the entire workshop and just make this one small change, you do better against Shupe. Banish Barclay. I've got a few cards listed there that can actually get the job done. Melina, Muzzle, Mushrooms, and Mandrake, the 4 M's. You want to banish Barclay because then you're weakening one of their strongest finishers. It's not the only one. Hattori into Barclay, and then replaying Barclay or replaying Hattori into Barclay in round 3 using Shupe. This is where a lot of their late game strength comes from, and if you can eliminate this card early, you can put them in a bad place. And of course, the last bullet point, pray to RNGesus. Shupe's a strong deck. I'm not going to lie. You need to have a little bit of luck. You need to pray. It's even if you were to follow this guide to the T and do all these things and make all these changes and play perfectly, you're gonna lose to RNGesus sometimes. So you've got to pray to him. Show him that you're respecting him and say, please don't let the Shupe draw. Please don't let the Shupe charm my unit. um, Moving on to the next one. Whoops. When to play Shupe. So, Shupe Mage. Now, this is one of the most powerful Shupe options. It's also one of the least consistent I found, but it does have its uses. In round 2, when you need to bleed your opponent to a short round 3, you want to play card draw. It's one less card you're bringing over into round 3, and a much shorter round three. Let's say you have 4 cards in your hand and you play Shupe for draw, and you have, I don't know, 2 golds and a silver left over. You just decreased the number of cards in round three by about 20%. That's definitely worth it against a deck which gains snowball value like Great Swords or something like that. In round three, when your opponent has a single tall unit on the board, then you would want to use the charm effect. Like I mentioned before, you want to try playing around that if you're not playing Shupe. If you're playing Shupe and they've got, say, I don't know, Sabbath by himself, or maybe they've got a 22-point spotter on the board, you're going to charm that guy. Your backup option for this is going to be weather. I never really find the weather to be a good primary option, just a backup. Moving on to Shupe Hunter. Um, In round three, you're going to want to play Shupe Hunter to replay Hattori or Barclay. These are units which you should be saving for your finisher anyway, and Shupe's just going to let you replay them again to get even more value. In round three, you can also use the Hunter to tutor Hattori or Barclay out of your deck. If you weren't lucky enough to draw them, you can actually tutor them from your deck. How cool is that? Your backup option in this Shupe option is very strong. Deal 2 damage 8 times. That's 16 points of damage on an 8-point body, so 24 points of value. You're probably going to be getting around 30 if you get a nice Hattori Barclay combo with Shupe, but 24 is not bad. Finally, we have Shupe Knight. So when you play Shupe Knight, to remove a high profile target such as Imlerith's Sabbath, maybe your opponent hasn't put the only unit on the board. Maybe they played around Charm. You know, they have 4 or 5 units. They have some Drakars or something. They've got, I don't know, some Wild Hunt Riders, whatever they're running. And then they play Sabbath. You need to get rid of Sabbath, right? You can play Shupe Knight to duel it. And usually, if it's not boosted over like 19 points or something, you can remove it from the board and then follow it up with Shiru or something like that if they renew it. Um, in round three, when you have the last play, Shupe Knight's not a bad option. It's a solid 25 points. And finally, in round two, when your opponent passes and you're behind by less than 12, Resilient Shupe is a great option. 12 points of carryover is nothing to laugh at. And this doesn't come up a lot, but I wanted to put it in there because it's a very specific circumstance, but I think it can definitely give you an edge. Uh, we're just going to wrap things up here with some quick tips. Uh, I strongly urge you guys to build and play the deck yourself if you haven't yet. The best way to learn how to beat a deck is by playing it yourself. I can't stress this enough. You know, if you don't want to tell your friends you're playing Shupe, you don't have to. You know, you can keep that in your diary if you want, never tell anyone, but take some time, play Shupe, learn it, learn the abilities, and figure it out. Because once you've played a deck, you gain an advantage playing against it because you learn how you lose, you learn how your opponent loses playing the deck. And sometimes you might be surprised at the strategies your opponents bring out against you when you're playing Shupe that you didn't even know about to begin with. So if you still refuse to stoop to the level of a filthy Scumatel, at least familiarize yourself with all of the Shupe options. You should know your enemy, know what they're going to play, know what they are looking for, and know what the chances of them getting what they want are. You need to be aware of all of the abilities or you can't play around them. Finally, have fun, guys. Don't get tilted. Enjoy yourselves. Don't panic. It's just a game, so Shupe's not going to be around much longer. I strongly urge you guys to get out there and try him out. I'm sorry. Don't panic. Shupe's going to be around longer. I don't think he's going to be around longer as this current state that we see him in, where he's very in this deck that's very strong. I think we've got some nerfs incoming, at least on War Dancer and a few other Scoia'tael cards. So Shupe will still be here, God willing. But in this current state, the Shupe deck is probably not going to be that strong. So enjoy it while it's still out there. And take care, guys. I'll see you all on the ladder. Good luck. Enjoy.